Let's talk about it. Let's talk about Waymo. Let's get right into this. First off, here's exactly where Waymo is located at the exact time of this video. The current cities right now are Los Angeles, Phoenix, and San Francisco. You can also get it right now in Atlanta and in Austin, but you have to get it through the Uber app. And there are people right now going on the Uber app, ordering a ride, they get a human driver, they cancel it. They keep doing this until they get the Waymo. And we'll talk about why in a second. But now, I look at this. When it comes to what Waymo's doing right now in terms of spreading like crazy, they're now testing it out in Denver and Seattle. And now, in addition, New York City is a big one. And you see all these different areas. And not only that, but when I go back to here, we see that coming soon, it's going to be in Miami soon and Washington, D.C. And right now, you can see right here that roughly, but this is from, I think, April 2025, so this is earlier in the year, there is roughly, they reported about 250,000 Waymo rides per week. I would not be surprised in the past, 4 or 5 months, whatever it is, I would bet that Waymo's probably now doing around 300,000 rides a week, maybe even more. Basically, over 1 million rides are happening with Waymo every month, and there's no slowing down. And I gotta be honest, this is very unfortunate for my human drivers. Now, a couple things I do want to say as we take a step back. One, you probably noticed this right away, but I kind of want to jump into the video. I hate wasting people's time. I tore my bicep. To be more specific, a distal tendon bicep tear is going to be a long recovery. Like, in case you didn't know, I do parkour and free running. I do acrobatics and everything. I'm probably not going to be back to full, to what I was doing before, basically, to like full recovery for maybe about 6 to 8 months. So it's going to be a while. Second thing is right now it is insanely hot in LA, and I actually can't sweat with this. I am prone to infection in case I sweat or if I get this wet. So I am running the AC in my apartment right now as I'm filming this video. Let me know what you think about the audio. I'm testing something out new where I'm basically running my AC while filming, and I'm using a noise reduction software to see if I can still make the audio work, even though the AC is running in the background. So I just want to say those couple of things in terms of my current situation. But let's talk about the more important situation, in my opinion, and that is Waymo. And here's the thing. I've done a lot of videos about Waymo. I've been doing more and more. There's a couple of different reasons why. Is one, we can't ignore it. You know, we can't ignore what's going on. And then two, looking at all these reports, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's more and more search traffic for Waymo every single month. And at first, I took my first Waymo ride a year ago. At first, I'm like, oh, this is maybe, I wasn't sure if it was a fad. It was kind of weird, kind of trippy. I've mentioned this in a lot of videos that it was kind of surreal. The steering wheel moves on its own, turns on its own and everything. It's very bizarre the first time you take one. Very bizarre. But then, one thing I didn't expect is not necessarily how much it took off, but is how much people loved it. And I figured that people would like it. I had a theory that with Waymo being this new thing, it's kind of like the new kid on the block. It's a new rideshare. People want to know maybe it's cheaper than an Uber or Lyft. That at first I'm like, again, I don't say a fad, but it was kind of like, oh, this is really interesting. Like I just mentioned, in places like Austin, for example, you can only get a Waymo, not from the app, but if you order an Uber. I think Uber's mindset is if you can't beat them, join them. And when it comes to Uber, there are people who are ordering an Uber, and I saw one report of one guy who I think ordered like 20 or 30 rides in a row, kept canceling all of them because it's a human driver that popped up until he got a Waymo because he wanted to try Waymo. He wanted to try a self-driving, autonomous vehicle, and Waymo is now spreading everywhere, like I showed you, soon to be in Washington, D.C. and Miami. But then, as they're doing more and more testing everywhere now, New York is in the running. Seattle is now in the running. Denver is now in the running. Granted, I think we're pretty far out from when they are going to be fully revealed, but maybe not. Waymo's kind of figured it out, and I know that you have companies like Tesla talking about doing some kind of Tesla app or self-driving car. I think Waymo, if you look at a lot of these statistics, and I've read a lot of articles about this, Waymo is well ahead of anything, well ahead of everything, and anything that's kind of trying to rival them. And like I said, the crazy thing to me that kind of blew my mind is, one, what I've noticed with a lot of people talking about a lot of this, and I know some of this is a bit pessimistic, especially if you are a human driver. If you're a taxi driver, a limousine driver, an Uber or Lyft driver, or another rideshare driver, you know, it is something that's now making big enough waves where it's undeniable, and it's getting worse because Waymo's taking up a lot of these rides. And I think the biggest thing that I not expect is, one, Waymo getting this popular this fast. It almost out of nowhere. That's one thing I really did not expect. But I think, two, is Waymo has this effect, which I know, again, a bit pessimistic for all my human drivers out there, is it does appear that once somebody takes a Waymo, they're kind of locked into it. It's not the kind of thing that they're like, oh, that was cool, but I'm just going to stick with Uber or Lyft. There is one report, I've talked about this in a few different videos, this was like a month or two ago, from a company called Obi, and they study a lot of ride-sharing pricing. And they found that typically the way it works, Waymo is the most expensive. On average, that is changing in my opinion, but on average, Waymo is the most expensive, then Uber, then Lyft. So typically, Lyft is the cheapest option, Waymo is the most expensive. That being said, they found throughout all their studies and analysis that people are still willing to spend more money to take a Waymo, even though it's not that, even though it's more expensive, and it's not that cheap at all. There are some times I've seen Waymos being literally twice the amount of an Uber or Lyft. Why are people still taking them? And I think there's a couple different theories I have. I think one is that when it comes to Waymo, you know, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people want to post social media videos about it and TikToks and everything. But two, I think the biggest thing is that I think in general, some people just like being alone. They're like, hey, I know it's more expensive than an Uber or Lyft, but I have the entire car to myself. I can control the music. I can turn it up or down. I can bump it as loud as I want or as little as I want. I don't have to have a human interaction. You know, if I want to make a business call or just call somebody, I can. You know, now Waymo has Spotify. I talked about that. In addition, you can now control the EQ settings on a Waymo, basically meaning you control the different frequency spikes of a given song. You can basically turn up the bass. I kind of probably worded that a bit better. I'm a DJ and producer in case you didn't know, but you can control the EQ in terms of like adjusting the mid, the bass, and also the sub bass, which is kind of crazy. So you have full control, in a sense, within reason, of the vehicle. And I think people are just liking that more. Another thing I do wonder is, if you look at the cities that Waymo has really kind of blown up in, you're looking at places like Los Angeles, San Francisco. These are very like tech-heavy cities. So one, maybe people are just interested in the new technology. They want to use the new technology, but also when it comes to like, look at LA, a lot of people here have a lot of money. Same thing in San Fran. So to maybe like a normal Joe Schmo like me, if I'm going to look at an Uber Lyft versus a Waymo, and like saying Uber is $20, but a Waymo is $35, I'm like, dude, just get the Uber. It's $20. I'm not going to spend almost double to go to that one venue. But to maybe someone who money isn't as much of an issue, where, like, say, you know, a lot of people here in LA and San Francisco have a lot of money, they're like, dude, for an extra $15, I have the entire thing to myself. I don't have to have a human driver. I don't have to deal with potentially the safety thing too. That's another big thing I've talked about in different videos. There's been more and more reports coming out that Waymos are now significantly safer to take, both in terms of accidents. Even when accidents do happen, people are way less prone to injury in that Waymo and a lot more. And this is where things are heading. With all this I'm saying, the explosion of it in a lot of different cities, the fact that people are now preferring Waymos to Ubers and Lyfts, even though it's more expensive. And I will say this too, I hate to say it, I check pricing pretty much every time I go out. You know, I'm very curious about the way the Uber and Lyft and ride-sharing market is kind of evolving. It's getting to the point now where week after week, I might even say month after month, I had to use a good time frame, Waymo's getting cheaper and cheaper. And it's undeniable. So even though maybe Obi did say that, and maybe that was true in the past year, I would bet money that in, let's say, halfway through 2026, statistically speaking, Waymos are going to be cheaper on average than Ubers and Lyfts. That's something I'm going to predict right now. So in about a year from the time of this video, I'm going to say, and love it or hate it, you don't tip your Waymo. That also saves people money. Even though I will say people don't tip Ubers and Lyfts, which is kind of annoying. That's something that is a horrible part of driving, and I want to make this video not to spread thought or fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I have talked about this in a lot of videos here and there, but as someone who used to drive for Lyft and Uber, I don't drive anymore. I have a lot of people following this channel who do drive, right? This channel is pretty much a ride-sharing channel. I do talk about the gig economy a little bit. I talk about Uber Eats and delivery driving a little bit, but it's mainly a ride-sharing channel. That's how it started as, and I was doing videos about how to make more money with Uber and Lyft. I did tutorials, technique-based videos, requirement videos, and what's tough is, as time has gone on, especially now, seeing how quick things are moving, I feel like to be vocal that if I was somebody looking to kind of get into rideshare driving, I don't know, especially if you live in a place like LA or San Fran, maybe not as much Austin or Atlanta, at least not yet, but I don't know. And that is a big thing I do have to say, that it's tough because it's a tricky thing, I think, for me making a video like this, where on one end, I don't want to make a depressing video. Of course, I don't want to make a depressing video, but two, I also want to make a transparent video. I want to make something that's honest, because that's the point of this channel, is me being fully transparent about everything I found in studies and research and all the kind of stuff. I put a lot of work into these videos, even though sometimes they do seem like I'm just rambling, which I know I can do for sure. And even though a lot of times it is me talking to the camera like this in more of a monologue format and everything, there's a lot of work behind the scenes that I do kind of divulge into, reading studies and statistics and analysis and meta-analysis for those and all this kind of stuff. And it is, I think, undeniable that right now, I think that for the first time maybe ever, because I will say this, Uber and Lyft went through a lot of different phases, and I've talked a lot about what's happening with Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, how, I think I talked about the big four, the big five, that things are more expensive now. Uber and Lyft is taking out a bigger cut. Uber and Lyft drivers are not making that much money. Right now, on average, the average driver makes about $22 to $23 an hour. When I first started driving in 2015, in the beginning of 2015, the average amount I said for most people was $20 to $25 an hour. So in the past 10 years, if you look at inflation and all that kind of stuff, Uber and Lyft drivers are not really making that much more. And I think that is where things get really, really unfortunate. That I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I don't want to sit here and be like, bro, you don't understand, like, if you're driving, but it is unfortunate. And yes, Uber Lyft has gone through a lot of phases. Like right now, for example, one big win for drivers, and this just happened a few days ago, whatever, in California, Uber and Lyft unions may actually now be a thing. That Uber and Lyft seem to kind of work with California in such a way. I've not done a video about that yet, but Uber and Lyft unions are a thing. And on one end, I'm like, that's a huge W. That's a huge W for drivers. But the big L for drivers, especially because that happened in California here, is Waymo. And there's no denying it anymore that, every year, and in case you didn't know, this is your first time watching one of my videos, every year I post a video, should you drive for Uber and Lyft in X year, in 2021, in 2022, and so I do it every year. It's kind of like an update of what's going on in the rideshare world, and I really go in depth. Like, sometimes a little too in depth, I'll be honest. I think this year, of should you drive for Lyft and Uber in 2025, I think the video was like an hour and a half long, so it's literally like a movie or like a podcast, but I do that every year, and I hate to say it, the first thing I'm going to bring up, spoiler alert, but the first thing I'm going to bring up in the upcoming video in a few months, should you drive for Uber and Lyft in 2026, is Waymo. That's going to be my first concern, that it's getting so rapidly. And like I said, the two big things is, one, like I said, Waymo's getting more popular by the day, and it's not slowing down. And two, which is, I'll be honest, like mind-blowing, unexpected for me. The second thing is, it's crazy how the second someone takes a Waymo, it's almost like they're hooked. And at first I was like, okay, well, I get it. Let's say you wake up. I know this happened with some of my friends. Full transparency, they wake up, like say they're hungover. And they're like, dude, I can't deal with life right now. I don't feel good. I feel sick. Let me throw on my sunglasses. I'm going to take a Waymo because I just don't want to deal with people right now. Okay, I get that. Like say if you have an important call, I get the advantage of a Waymo. But the fact that it seems like Obi's shown, the fact that it seems like, and this is what's happening, that the second people take a Waymo, they're like, whoa, for better or for worse, a lot of people are considering it better than an Uber or Lyft. And don't get me wrong, Waymo's not perfect. There's a lot of advantages, and I've done videos about this. There's a lot of advantages to taking a Uber or Lyft or having a human driver. A lot of them. Waymo's far from perfect, and you can look at a lot of different things. Safety issues, actually, there's some safety issues with Waymo, with people stopping Waymos. Human driver would know how to get around that. You're talking about just the human interaction, like supporting human drivers. AI taking over people's jobs is something that pretty much all of us are kind of worried about. In addition, like I said too, even though yes, sometimes Waymo can sometimes be cheaper, Uber and Lyft are cheaper. There's a lot of advantages to having a human driver, but it's that weird thing that the second someone orders a Waymo and takes it, they seem to love it too much. And all things are leading up. This is something that's starting to take over these cities in a very rapid rate. And I'm not hating on Waymo. I'm also not hating on Uber or Lyft. I'm not trying to hate on human drivers. I'm not trying to hate on AI drivers or automated drivers or self-driving cars. I'm not trying to hate on anything here. I think I'm just explaining the landscape as I've seen it and as it's moving forward, because things are not going to get better, I think, for human drivers. And there's no other way to word that.